Good evening. This is Assemblywoman Petrie-Norris. So pleased that you're able to join us for a virtual workshop this evening on financial literacy and creating personal financial stability. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us are feeling concerned about the economy, kind of big picture, and about our own personal financial situation. The COVID-19 pandemic has kicked off a pandemic-induced recession. We all know someone who has lost a job or lost a business and is grappling with the financial challenges that have been part of this pandemic. So the timing is absolutely perfect for us to welcome two representatives from the Financial Planning Association of Orange County. Today, I'm joined by Jodi Selleck and Mark Phillips, who are going to be leading us, as I said, in a virtual workshop on building personal financial stability. So thank you all so much, both for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Well, and before we jump into the workshop, would love to, if you can just introduce yourself to the folks at home. Jodi, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, thank you again, Assemblywoman. We're very happy to be here, and we appreciate you having us. I am Jodi Selleck, and I'm a certified financial planner, and I am a member of the Financial Planning Association of Orange County. I am on the Pro Bono Community Outreach Committee, and we have done quite a bit of outreach over the years, mostly in person through financial planning days. And now, because of the new world that we're living in, we have created a virtual platform to be able to reach more folks in our community and provide financial education and increased financial literacy through our communities. I'm also a small business owner here in Orange County. I have an office in Irvine, sole proprietor, and again, I'm thrilled that we can be here and we can impart some of what we know with our community and your constituents.
Well, thank you, Jodi, and I think it's great that, as you said, even in our new Zoom reality, we're able to continue to connect with our constituents and continue to share this information, which, as I said, I think it's more important than ever for folks right now. And hello, Mark. Thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for letting us have this opportunity to share some of the information we've got. My name is Mark Phillips, and I'm, like Jodi, a certified financial planner, a member of the Financial Planning Association of Orange County, actively involved in the pro bono work that we do in the outreach committee, and along with a number of other things. And like Jodi, running my own small business where we help people. And this is just, as Jodi said, been a really interesting time, and you've already touched on it in so many ways, where in order for us as an organization to do what we want, we had to shift how we did it, because there wasn't a question that we could stop helping people. And so we're really happy to be here today and have this opportunity that you've given us to share and be a part of what you're trying to do to help people put themselves in a better place.
Well, terrific. I think what we'll go ahead and do is hand over, I guess, the reins to you. You've got a presentation to share and to walk folks through. And then we've got some questions. We have a few that people have sent in advance, and then a few that might come up as you go through the presentation. But if you can walk us through that, and then we'll jump into some questions after.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, well, again, thank you to everyone for joining us today. And our presentation today is on the building blocks for creating personal financial stability. And here we go. So just a quick disclaimer on what this presentation is not. We are not giving specific guidance or advice, financial advice or tax advice or legal advice to anyone. It's just a general informational presentation. And just want to be clear on that. So what financial stability means? It means a lot of things to different people. We believe it means you are confident with your financial situation, meaning you're not staying awake at night, nervous about how you're going to make ends meet financially. You can pay your bills on time, and you have some money saved to cover emergencies and future goals. There are 6 steps to building financial security or stability. The first would be to set clear goals. So you have to evaluate where you are today and determine where you want to be tomorrow, and set those clear goals that you'll be able to measure as you go forward. Number 2 is to follow a budget. And it doesn't have to be something scary. A budget just has to be your own way of gauging where your money is coming in and where it's going to. Number 3 is to create an emergency fund. And I think in our lifetime, there's been no better example of the need for having an emergency fund than what we've all experienced through this pandemic. And so creating an emergency fund is very important. We're going to go into more detail on all these steps as we go forward. Number 4 is to save for your retirement and for other goals, things like taking a vacation or buying a car or buying a home. Those are all things that you would save for and plan for. Number 5 is to build and maintain a good credit history. And number 6, make a plan to pay off any potential bad debt that you currently have, like credit cards, etc. So setting clear goals means it's not what you wish or what you hope for, but it's actually setting clear, defined goals. Like, I want to start saving $50 per pay period towards building an emergency fund. That would be a clear goal. And there's a little acronym that we use about SMART goals. So achieving a goal requires making a plan, right? Your plan and your goals should be defined and specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So again, that means you look at where you are today, think about where you want to be in the future, in the short term, intermediate term, and long-term future, and define it. I want to start saving $50 per pay period towards my emergency fund. And then I want to, in the next couple of years, pay down my credit cards or pay off my credit cards. In 5 years, I would like to have X amount of dollars as a down payment for my home. And so I will save $200 per month to get to that goal and achieve that goal. So we like to use our family goals worksheet, which will be available to anyone that wants to access it on the FPAOC probono.org website. For using this worksheet for setting your goals. Your 1-year goals from today, an example would be, okay, so an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of your needs for an emergency fund. So if every month you're spending $1,000 or $2,000 on rent, and you have insurance, medical insurance, car insurance, gasoline, things that you need in order to survive. 3 to 6 months of what those expenses are saved in an emergency fund is ideal. Again, we start from wherever we are. So you build it incrementally. If you can't save more than $25 each pay period, that's fine. You just start from where you are, and over time it will build. The point being that you're setting yourself up with a new habit, a good habit of working towards your goal and sticking to it. Goals, for example, for 2 years from today would be, as I said earlier, paying off your credit cards. So let's say you have $4,800 in debt. You want to save approximately $200 per month for the next couple of years and be paying it towards that credit card to pay it off. And then a 5-year goal would be, as I mentioned, something like building up a down payment for buying a new home. Maybe it's buying a car. Maybe it's taking a vacation that you'd like to take. And then the long-term goals, 10 years and beyond, hopefully, for many of us, would be retirement goals. So you're building up your retirement savings and building towards that future of someday being able to retire and still be able to cover your expenses without having to worry. Okay, so step number 2 in those building blocks of building personal financial stability would be following a budget. You have to know how much is coming in and how much is going out and where the money is going. And it's oftentimes surprising to folks of where they're spending their money and how much they're spending their money. So creating a budget, tracking your expenses is very important and very enlightening. And something that we always talk about doing, but without judgment. Whatever it is, right? So to be aware of where you're spending your money and then be able to make those adjustments that you need to make to put you in line with accomplishing your goals is what this is all about. It's not about beating yourself up or feeling bad about whatever you're doing. So know where your money goes, know what your needs versus your wants are. You need to pay your rent or your mortgage or put gasoline in your vehicle. You want to be able to go out to eat once a week or whatever that want may be. Prioritize your spending. You know, again, no judgment. Just look at where you're spending your money and make those adjustments to keep you in line with accomplishing your goals. A budget will also help you to avoid getting yourself into unnecessary debt, right? So you know how much you have coming in. You're able to track how much is going out, how much is covering your needs, how much you're allocating to wants, hopefully allocating to savings, and not getting yourself in debt. As you've heard many times before, it's about living within your means and not living to where you're becoming indebted. So, and also you want to identify opportunities to plug those holes where you say, wow, I had no idea I was spending so much money on fill in the blank, whatever it may be for you. For some people, it's buying coffee. For some people now that, well, especially during this COVID time, it's been a lot of people ordering takeout food, right? Because everyone's gotten tired of cooking so much or whatever it may be. You can eliminate some of that wasteful spending. And again, living within your means. And saving for your financial goals. So once again, building up that emergency fund that is very important, and then also for accomplishing your goals, whatever they may be for the future. So this budget worksheet is an example that we use and we share with many of our pro bono clients. And it's just a good tool for you to track what your money coming in is. So we start with after-tax earnings, and then prioritize your expenses on the budgeting worksheet, your rent, your mortgage, your home maintenance, auto costs, groceries, all the things that you need to live on. Then the next tranche would be your wants, things that like buying new clothes and maybe entertainment expenses, Netflix, or whatever it is that you spend the money on for entertainment, and gifts and things of that nature, birthdays, holidays. And then also budgeting for that savings and repayment of debt and paying yourself. So we have 401k contributions that can be to an IRA, it can be to any retirement vehicle that you are using, but it is important to pay yourself and to budget that in whatever amount you need to be allocating towards paying yourself and for your savings and for your future. So you add all that up, and then this is not set in stone, but it's just kind of one example again that we're using here is using the 50-30-20 split, which is 50% of your budget should be allocated to your needs, 30% maximum to your wants, and then 20% for savings and debt repayment. This is absolutely something that is personal to each individual. And so for many people, the reality is that 100% of what you're earning is going towards your necessities. And that is understandable. And again, we're starting from wherever we are at the moment and looking towards how we want to budget and build for the future. So again, saving for short-term and long-term goals is important. And the debt repayment component, a lot of people don't think of that as something that you budget for, but it is a very important component for those that have debt, especially bad debt, credit cards, auto loans, things that it's not serving you in any way to hold on to that. And so budgeting to pay that down is very important. So again, we devise a plan. We know that we have to be flexible with our plans always. I don't think that anyone really could have predicted 2020 and all of the challenges. And so there are many folks that thought they were doing okay, and the world just kind of, blew up in front of them and we found ourselves in really challenging, financially challenging times. And so we always have to be flexible as well. And again, saving and having that emergency fund is an important component of what we need to plan for always, because at any given time, it may not be COVID. It's that your tire's flat, your car broke, your water heater broke. There are so many things that can happen that are unforeseen expenses, and having that emergency fund will help you from incurring additional debt if you have money saved to allocate towards those expenses. So stay focused on your goals. Ask yourself and do the check-in periodically. Do I really need to be spending the money on whatever it is? How much time do you need to spend working? And there's this little equation that you can do: the cost of an item divided by, what you have coming in, whether it be through earned income or, whatever your income source is. By the time that you have to put into it, or the time you have to work to earn that money to pay for that item. And is it worth it? And again, there's no judgment. The answer may be for you that yes, it is worth it. And that's okay. As long as you do it with eyes wide open, you know what you're getting into, you know what it's going to ultimately cost you, and you're able to pay it off and not put yourself in more debt for acquiring whatever it is. So this is a great example, maybe not as timely right now because I'm not sure how many people are sitting in line at Starbucks today, but which line are you in for savings, right? Is it you're standing in the Starbucks line so that you can spend it? Are you standing in the retirement line and hopefully you're saving it? This diagram gives you a visual for if you were to go to, and I don't want to pick on Starbucks necessarily, it can be any place that you go and spend $4 on something that is a want versus a need. And you go once a week, over the course of a year, that's a little over $200. If you go 5 times a week, over the course of a year, that's over $1,000. And if you go 7 times a week, it's almost $1,500. So it's really easy to lose perspective on that when it's just $4 each day, right? But then when you think about it, well, what if you cut it back and you go once a week? Now it's $200 over the course of a year. And let's say you used to go 5 times a week. That's over $800 that you can put someplace else, right? To savings, to paying off credit cards, to retirement, to saving for a trip to, the Grand Canyon, whatever it may be. So this visual, I think I've seen a lot of people during presentations look at this and say, wow, I never really thought of it that way. So not to scare anyone, just bring awareness. Okay, and step number 3, again, creating an emergency fund. So what is an emergency fund? Ideally, the financial wisdom will tell you that it's 3 to 6 months of living expenses, your needs, your fixed living expenses. For some people, that comfort level of an emergency fund can be 12 months. It's personal for a lot of people, but a minimum of 3 months. If you're starting from nothing, you want to build to a minimum of 3 months. And if you're at 3 months, then build towards 6 months, ideally. Once again, during this time of COVID, so many people found themselves needing to replace lost wages, and there were delays and still are delays for many to have that income replacement. And so if you have an emergency fund or did have an emergency fund, it helps to buffer that and relieve some of that stress. So why? Again, protecting against lost income. And I think the stress factor is a really big one that often doesn't get talked about when we're just talking about the numbers. Financial stress, the physical, emotional stress that people are under when they're feeling like they can't put food on the table for their family, it's a really real thing. And it adds to a lot of people having health issues. And so the big picture is, for many reasons, it's important to try and protect against that happening. And where to put your emergency funds, we recommend always to keep the money in an FDIC insured account. So it's not money that you want to have invested in the stock market or in bonds or anything like that. You want to keep it in an easy access savings account in a bank or a credit union. And it's not going to earn much interest right now, but it's also not going to lose value. It's just going to be safe and there when you need to access it. And with that, okay, this is another visual for the importance of an emergency fund. We have two individuals, Sally and Steve, and Sally had an emergency fund of $3,000, which she had saved towards. Steve had $0, and Sally had to supplement some of her lost wages with savings and also credit card because she didn't have enough to cover the full $6,000 of lost wages. Steve had to cover the entire amount of the lost wages with a credit card. And 18% is probably about average today on credit cards. And so for Sally to pay off the $3,000 that she borrowed at $100 a month, took her 3.5 years. She made a total of $4,000 in payments. So she borrowed $3,000, paid back $4,015. And you can see from the example that the total cost all in was $7,015 when her savings plus what she borrowed from credit cards plus the interest she had to pay back. Steve, on the other hand, had to borrow the full amount, as I said, paying it off at $100 a month. It took him 12, almost 13 years to pay off the $6,000 that he borrowed. Wound up paying more than what he borrowed in interest, over $9,000 for total payments of $15,465. And again, if that was the absolute only way that Steve can cover the amount needed, then yes, I mean, it has to be done. And being able to budget for paying down that debt faster would have been beneficial so that it doesn't wind up paying so much interest. But ideally, as Sally has shown, even if you didn't have the full amount saved, even if it was only half of the amount that you needed, it makes a big difference in ultimately what any expense will cost you. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mrs. Selleck. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to move forward with steps 4, 5, and 6, and we're going to start with saving for retirement and other goals. And before I dig too much into this, I really want to emphasize how important it is what Jodi just shared with all of us about the emergency fund, because without that, you can't go to this yet. That protects this. The emergency fund protects whatever you're about to do in saving for retirement. So what we want to do in saving for retirement, and we're going to focus on retirement, but it doesn't need to only be retirement. It could be for down payment for a house, as Jodi mentioned, or some other goals that you have that are more long-term. Work towards maximizing retirement savings, and how you might go about doing that is to participate in an employer retirement plan, and possibly get an employer match. Now, if you're working for an employer and they have a retirement plan, you've done all the things that Jodi already talked about, and a few other things we're going to talk about, then deferring money into the employer plan rather than taking it as take-home pay will allow you to save more, because you'll be able to potentially avoid taxes either now on that money for a while or later. And you'll also possibly get an employer match. It's kind of like getting a bonus. And I don't want to call it free money, because they are spent there. It's part of the compensation they're willing to give you. But if you don't put money in, then you won't get the match. And you know, so that's an important factor. Another nice thing about an employer retirement savings program, or you can also do this on your own as well, is to automate the savings process. Just at whatever level you can, as Jodi said, if it's $25 a paycheck now or $50 a paycheck now, whatever it is, start. And then whatever you're at, gradually increase it. Because if you start, just a good start is halfway done, if you will. If you start and then you gradually increase it, you will get somewhere. This is all about positive forward momentum. So if it's a payroll program through work, that'll be automated. It'll take it out of your paycheck, put it into the retirement plan account in your name. If you don't have that, you can automatically have money moved into an IRA or a Roth IRA from your checking account. And you can set that up to be automated as well. And so once it's automated, hopefully you just kind of forget about it. It just starts growing. The other part of this is to use time to your advantage. If you're saving for a long-term goal, take advantage of the long-term nature of it. And starting early will let you do that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of how much of an impact that can have here in this next graphic that I'm going to share with you. An example of somebody who started saving and was saving, I don't want to say a modest amount, but kind of a solid amount, about $420 a month. And if that person was getting about an 8% return on how they were investing the money, so they were saving it, they were investing it. And if they did this, you can follow along on the graph. If they did this over years, what would happen is we look out here and we imagine that the person started when they were 40 years old, and 25 years later, so about halfway out this graph on the bottom axis, we see 25. That's 25 years later, they've got about $80,000 that they've contributed, the light green area, they've contributed. The dark green represents the additional money that's now in that investment account, the retirement investment account, that is there by virtue of the growth on the money that they've put in. And you can see that it's about 3 times more than the amount they've contributed. Or about 3/4 of all the money is the growth. And you can see if you go out to 35 years, what kind of an impact that can have. So starting, and you can also see that the curve starts to almost go vertical the longer you go out. So the more time you have, what starts to happen is the money that is there is growing by more than what you're adding after a while. Doesn't look like it at first. At first, it's like a game of inches, but over time, it just starts like a snowball rolling downhill. It starts to pick up more mass itself and starts to grow faster without you having to add that much more to it or any more to it. But this happens only because you take advantage of time, and time only happens because you start early. Start small but early, rather than thinking, oh, I can't really start big enough, so I'll wait. That does not serve you well, or me well. The step number 5 has to do with building a good credit history. And a good credit history, of course, gives you access to credit, to borrowing at preferential rates, gets you lower interest rates oftentimes on credit cards and things like that. But it does more than that. Sometimes employers will look at your credit history and your credit score. Sometimes landlords will look at your credit score. So there's a whole host of things that a good credit score gets you better access to and helps. It's kind of like it cuts two ways. Doing the things that get you a better credit score tend to add stability to your life. Having a better credit score tends to also add stability to your life. So it's almost like a multiplier effect. So I want to talk first about the scores themselves and then the methodology that's typically used for these scores. So a credit score, firstly, is different than your credit report. As a matter of fact, the primary company that scores you for a credit score, Fair Isaac Company, is a completely independent company from the credit reporting agencies, which are TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Completely independent company. Fair Isaac Company takes the information from your credit reports and it uses it through a computation method to try to give you a score. And so if you have a score, so as a benchmark, if you have a score that's in the mid to high 600s or higher, that's good. If you're in the mid 700s or higher, that's really very good. And honestly, if you're over 800, that's very rare and very exceptional. If you are below, say, 670 or 650, that means there's definitely an opportunity to try to get your score up, or for that matter, even to try to get it up into the low to mid 700s. And there's usually not a lot of things that you have to do that will move that score upwards, because even some of the things that have brought it down, and we'll talk about what affects it now, they phase out over time. Like something that you may have done a year ago that brought your score down, over time, it just gets less and less weight in your score. It doesn't stay there forever. Let me go back one. Let's go. There we are. So payment history, you notice two pieces of this pie chart, which FICO uses to model your score, are huge compared to the other three. One is payment history, which is really the history of how diligently did you make on-time payments for any debts that you have. And the second one that has an oversized weight is the amount of money that you owe. In particular, the amount of money that you have as a debt on something like a credit card. And the example of that would be if you had a credit card with a $5,000 limit on it, which is the line of credit for the credit card, and you were carrying 4,500 or almost 5,000 of a balance, that's a negative. That'll bring your score down. If you have a 5,000 line of credit on a credit card and you're carrying a 500 or a $1,000 balance, not so much a negative impact on your score. These two factors make up 2/3 of your FICO score, and they are the things that really have to do with, as Jodi mentioned, like budgeting and managing your spending and having a reserve so that you're not borrowing against a credit card or some other consumer debt mechanism. And so doing what Jodi talked about is going to kind of have a roll-through effect of impacting your FICO score in a positive way. Now, the other thing that you should do relative to your FICO score is make sure your credit reports themselves are accurate. And so let's take a look. I want to share with you. The credit reports are compiled by and held by these three companies: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. They're located in different parts of the country. They're independent companies. They, to a certain degree, compete with each other. However, legislation has been passed that requires them to give each of us a free look at the reports that they have, the information they've collected. Each of us a free look once a year with each of them. And the website address that you see on this slide at the very bottom in the blue box, www.annualcreditreport.com is a website that you can go to, and it will guide you through the process of getting access with each or all of these, the reports that each or all of these credit reporting agencies have. And I would strongly suggest this. We have our active clients that we work with regularly do this, because we want them to check through and see, is there anything being reported inaccurately? Is there anything being reported that's a surprise to you, like a credit card you thought you had closed, but is still open? This is a great resource for you to check. What does the universe out there think you're actually doing in terms of credit and the use of credit and what credit you have open? A second thing that I will mention while we're here and talking about the credit reporting agencies is the opportunity to freeze your credit. So I want you to consider freezing your credit, which you can do individually with each of these credit reporting agencies, and that stops them from selling your information and stops a lot of solicitation coming your way, which is often quite good. Now, I want to finally talk about debt management and paying off debt. And this circles right back to a lot of what Jodi was talking about. The first step, though, is understanding your debt and knowing what you've got. So in order to approach that, would suggest that you figure out who you owe, how much you owe them, the payment amount and the due dates, and the interest rate that they are charging you. Some of that is going to be on the credit reports, but a lot of that you're going to know yourself without the credit reports, hopefully. You also want to know what other finance charges or fees or penalties they might assess you for late payment or other things such as that. And then from all that, how long it will take you to repay the loan. But actually, we'd like you to make a plan for repaying the loan, first by cataloging all of your debt on a table like this. So tables like this and the ones that Jodi shared with you earlier are available to you, no cost. We've just kind of created them or pulled them from other resources and put them on the website for the FPA of Orange County, free for you to go there and just take them down and use them however you want. But look here, what you can do is create a table, and the second table says take the first table and then reorganize it by something like interest rate or balance. And you're going to see why in the next slide that can be helpful, because there's two methodologies that we would say give you a systematic way of attacking the debt and paying it down. The first one we're going to refer to as the highest interest first method, and the second one, the snowball method. So I'm going to take you through both briefly. The highest interest first method says pay the minimum on all of the debts. Pay the minimum to each of the credit cards and each of the debts that you own. And then dedicate a little bit more of your cash flow, whether it's $50, $100, $200, or more if you can, a little bit extra of your cash flow that you pay only against the highest interest debt, the debt with the highest interest rate, the highest percentage interest rate. And what that will do is that will accelerate the payoff of that particular debt. After all, that debt is your highest cost debt. And the faster you can get rid of that, doesn't matter whether it's the largest balance or not, the faster you can get rid of that debt, the faster you got rid of the most expensive debt that you've been carrying. Once you do pay that debt off, take all of the money that you've been applying towards that debt and use it as the extra payment on the next highest interest rate debt. You can see how this then just builds. You have the same amount that you're paying against the debt, but you're paying an oversized amount towards the highest interest rate debt all the time until you've wiped it all out. The snowball method is similar in that you pay the minimum on all the debt. However, instead of targeting the highest interest rate debt, you target the lowest balance, and you get that paid off that much faster. It's not quite as cost effective as the highest interest rate method, but it sure gives you a good feeling to get one or two of these knocked out, just and knock them out. Like you might do the snowball method on a very small debt that you have, and then you might switch to the highest interest rate first method. Now, minimum monthly payments only as a long-term strategy
are not a good strategy. There are times, and we're in kind of one of those times for many people, where making the minimum payments is all that we can do, if we can do that. But from a long-term perspective, that isn't a good strategy. So you want to take on a strategy that's like minimum plus, and these are two of the ways you can do the plus. There are a number of great websites and assistance services that can help you with debt. If it seems just completely overwhelming, turn to credit counseling. USA.gov has some resources in that regard, and I think there are some in the community as well. They're really good. To wrap it up, I want to touch on a few resources that we have, like how to improve your overall financial literacy. And I would offer that anything that you do just to become more knowledgeable is going to give you better decision-making tools. Better decision-making tools is going to turn into better decisions over time. Be patient with yourself, but be consistent with yourself. Subscribe to a personal financial publication or whether it's in print or online. There are a number of podcasts and blogs that are also useful. Look for the ones that are just providing very core fundamental guidance and information. Possibly take a personal financial course. There's a number of them offered through high schools and colleges here locally. Review your bank account, your credit union website. Stay aware of what's happening with your money, where it is, and also your credit reports, as we've touched on. And then there are many really good books, a couple of them that spring to our mind, like The Millionaire Next Door, which was written many years ago, and it's still super appropriate. It's never gone out of fashion. The Little Book of Common Sense Investing is another great one. The Index Card, Why Personal Finance Doesn't Have to Be Complicated. That's a good point. A lot of times we think it's so hard that we don't dig in. If you dig in a little, I think you're going to find that there's a point at which it gets easier. Stay with it. Now, any questions that you have, we have also another resource that we offer, no charge, no obligation, and that is you can go to the Financial Planning Association of Orange County's pro bono community outreach site, and you can reach by going to fpaocprobono.org. It's the orange letters on this slide. And you can schedule a free one-on-one financial planning session with a certified financial planner. There's just no obligation to do anything else. That's all we're offering, is a chance for some free coaching and some free, very specific to your situation advice. You can also sign up for free webinars that we have, and you can download resources such as some of the things we've shared with you today there. And turn it back to Jodi.
I think we lost our screen. we just wanted to, that last slide, we just wanted to thank our group on the FPAOC Pro Bono Community Outreach Committee for all the hard work that everyone has done to create this platform that we have created to provide virtual financial planning on a pro bono basis to all of our communities throughout Orange County and the Inland Empire. And we have a great group and we're very grateful to them. So we just wanted to give them a shout out.
Well, thank you both. That presentation had just a ton of really good information. And we've got a handful of questions that I said some folks sent us in, in advance, and got a few as you were talking. And Jodi, the first question is for you. Kind of picking up on just you talked about how our current situation has really highlighted how critical it is for everyone to have an emergency fund. And your presentation touched on this, but we did have a question from someone who said, I've got a high credit limit. That's what I always use as a backup. I've got a low interest credit card. Why do I need to set up an emergency fund? So can you just speak to why is a high credit limit a poor substitute for an emergency fund?
Sure. Well, I think the example that we showed really points out that whatever the expense is that you're covering with the credit card winds up costing a lot more than what that actually it needed to cost in the long run when you're using a credit card. Zero interest credit cards, that's a compelling argument for a lot of people. Generally, it's only zero interest for a period of time. If you're highly, highly disciplined and you put it on a zero interest, whatever your expenses that you're covering in an emergency on a zero interest credit card, and you can pay it off within the time frame, that's okay. But ideally, you don't tap into that because most people are not able to pay it off before the interest rate increases. And then it just winds up costing more in the long run.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's easy to get caught out when that, kind of the trial period expires.
Sure.
And, bottom line is that these companies wouldn't be selling these financial products to consumers if they weren't making money on them.
Absolutely.
Right? And so they know that they catch a lot of people out. Is what I would add. And one thing I was struck by as you all were going through the presentation, Mark, is what you're advocating is very much a slow and steady approach. It's not okay, now we're going to game the market and become a day trader. And it's, if you invest, like you said, start small, start early. You can grow that $5,000 a year into a huge amount for retirement. I'm sure you've seen your fair share of cautionary tales for folks who thought they were going to kind of play the market and win. What do you say to people that go, gosh, why would I settle for an 8% return when I can make 200% return if I play the market right?
So what I typically say to them, honestly, is I say that isn't going to happen. It's just not going to happen. We run around in this country with this story of people who look like they've just struck it rich. They just, first time out, and now they're multimillionaires. And the truth is, the vast, vast, vast majority of people who have accumulated wealth did it over decades, and sometimes generations. And that's really the way to get secure wealth for most all people. But when we keep playing the short game, we keep thinking it's got to be an instant win, we take huge risks. And often those risks end up costing us a lot more. And a lot of, so it doesn't work. When I'm working with clients, my job is not to try to get 20% of them to a point of financial stability and wealth. My job is to get 100% of them to permanent financial stability, as Jodi and as everybody who does this professionally. And so what we're sharing here is very much what we do when we work with our clients. This is the formula that has a much higher probability of actually working. So that's why we promote it.
And Jodi, you a couple times used the phrase bad debt versus good debt. Can you just talk about what you mean by those terms? What's the distinction?
Sure. Well, bad debt is credit card debt that you're paying off that you used to buy, clothing or furniture or whatever it was, and that you're paying high interest rates on. Good debt would be things, and just to back up for a moment, you need to have some debt or be able to have debt and then pay it off to have credit, right? To build the credit that you need to have. So an example of good debt would be like a mortgage. When you want to buy a house, that's where you're going to live and hopefully have stability for your family. And so most people can't afford to just pay cash for a house, especially here in Southern California. And so taking on debt that you can afford to pay on a monthly basis, not getting in over your head, and hopefully at a good interest rate because you've built up a good credit, that's okay to have that debt. That's good debt. And paying that on time will continue to build your good credit over time. So credit cards, bad. Mortgages, okay, good.
And then anything that's kind of a depreciating asset, kind of somewhere in the middle, right? And it kind of comes back, I think, Jodi, to what you said. It's like, people can make their individual trade-offs, but make sure you understand what those trade-offs are, right? And is the dream car worth not having the house, or just it's all about, I think, to your point, it's the upfront planning lets you just be really honest with yourself about the choices that you're making.
Right.
Really well
said. So you talked about credit scores, Mark, and the importance of credit scores. And I got a couple of questions from people that said, so what can I do to improve my credit score? And you spoke to a couple of those things. Are there kind of any practical tips that folks at home should follow?
When, as I said, get a copy of your report from all of them and all of the agencies. And if you see things on there that you think are wrong, dispute them. They have a dispute process. Write to them and dispute it. If the people that have been reporting that don't counter with their argument, the credit reporting agency is required to drop that off the report.
Okay.
And that sometimes that can tremendously raise your score. But that's the first thing. The second is, it's kind of back to what Jodi talked about. Be budgeted, be consistent, be steady, and try to build up. So the person who sent the question in about, oh, I've got credit card, I've got a large line of credit. It's like you said, if you get caught out, suddenly then you're in a position where you are paying much higher interest, and you've now temporarily wounded your credit score as well. It's kind of like a 1-2 punch. So put yourself in a position where you've got cash, you've got some capital. Even if you have to do so very gradually, try to do that. Make some sacrifices earlier, even if only small, so that you can pay the bills on time and you can get that payment history in a good place. And it's really a steady game. Be patient with yourself, but be consistent. Don't give up.
Well, and I think that what I took away from what you were saying as well is that even if you do get in a little bit of trouble and your credit score does go down, you can rebuild it over time. If if you're consistent about always making your payments on time, you can rebuild it. It's not like you're lost.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. In fact, everything on there drops off within a 7-year period.
Yeah.
So, and even once it's out 3 or 4 years, it has much less of an impact on your score. Absolutely right.
And I did have one other credit card question. So I just lost my job because of COVID. I have a lot of credit card debt, and I don't know what can I do? So Mark had mentioned, you mentioned that there's credit counseling services available. For anyone who's in that position, can you just speak a little bit more to that, and where can people go to find out more information about that?
Wow. This is a little bit of a delicate area. Firstly, it's not really my area of expertise, but I would share with you that there are some firms that are funded by state and federal agencies, and that really are doing good work, that are just trying to offer good advice. And I just want to warn you, there are private companies that also do this, or at least claim to do this, and may not be as consistent and in following through. And we've seen both. So work with companies that seem to be, or organizations that seem to be, part of the county or the state or the federal government. If they've got .gov at the end, go through them for referrals. And you can also work directly with the credit card companies as well. You can call them up, tell them your situation, and say, look, I need to be on a payment plan. Now, it will ding your credit score. However, it's temporary. And if it gets you out of hot water, it's better to have financial stability and take a temporary ding on your credit score than to bury yourself deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. You have to, stop the burying as fast as possible. Absolutely.
And if I may,
please.
Sorry, I just want to share a couple of resources. One new one actually that we just learned about today is called NaviCoreSolutions.org. It's a nonprofit organization that helps consumers with debt management and debt counseling. So it's NaviCoreSolutions.org. And then you can also go to NFCC.org, which is a national nonprofit for consumer organization. nonprofit, so they're not going to charge you anything up front, which is what you always want to look for when it comes to consumer credit counseling. You don't want to have to pay something and then have them give you the guidance.
Okay.
So those are just two resources that consumers can go to and for guidance and for hopefully either no cost or very low cost to help get on track and manage their debt.
Okay, great. That's terrific advice. And before we wrap up, just one last question for both of you. Are there any apps that either you use to manage your money or to budget, or any apps that you recommend for your clients?
Yeah. I would throw out mint.com.
Okay.
I mean, there's a few that are quite good, but this is probably one of the better ones. It's www.mint.com. It was a small startup and it got bought out by Intuit, and they do a great job of helping you aggregate all of your expenses, categorize them, and even track your spending and set spending limits in certain categories. Don't try to do it all on your phone though. Try to do it on a real computer, and then you can also log into it on your phone or track it through texting. But that's one of the better ones that I've seen. How about you?
Okay,
Jodi?
great. What about you, Jodi?
Well, I think some banks and credit unions have apps that you can use on their sites also. I know NerdWallet is a good resource that I refer to very frequently, that they rate a lot of the different apps. Some are free, some have a fee. We're always for free. As long as you're working through a reputable organization, we're always for free. And I think online apps are a fantastic resource for people that feel comfortable doing it. And pen and paper works too, for
Right,
those that
right.
don't want to do that. Pen and paper works fantastically. Envelopes, budgeting out and your money into envelopes, if you want to do it that way, or just what your bills are, whatever works, whatever's comfortable and works for people.
Yeah, I remember that's what my mom always did.
Yeah.
My mom always had the envelopes at the beginning of every month.
Right.
That was,
Yeah.
that was what she did.
It's great.
Yep. Well, thank you again, both so much for spending this time with us and for sharing what is really, really valuable and useful information. Before we wrap up, any parting thoughts for folks at home?
Be patient
Mark,
with
we'll start with
yourself. I would just say be patient with yourself and try to be as consistent as possible, and look into the future. Like, imagine the future and how it could be, and just keep striving to do a little bit more towards making that future a little more stable, and have the patience to give yourself time for that to happen.
Good.
That's great advice. And Jodi?
Yeah, I would echo the same. Just, be patient and be consistent. Don't judge yourself. Just wherever you're at right now is perfectly fine. Just look to where you want to be tomorrow and work towards that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like being on a diet or working out or quitting smoking or, whatever it is that you want to do to improve your circumstances and make your life better and your family's life better, baby steps. And before you know it, you're going to be, on the road to a better financial life. So, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Course.
That is, yes. Yeah. Good. Yes. Such good advice. Well, thank you both again for joining us, and to folks at home, thank you for tuning in for our virtual workshop on building financial stability, which is always important and certainly particularly important in the midst of this moment. So we will see you next week. And in the meantime, be safe and stay well.